Hi! Welcome to this part of my review featuring Konosuba, God's Blessing on This Wonderful World, TRPG. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review, featuring this role-playing game based on the popular isekai series, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about the action check rules. Let's start with basic checks and opposition checks. During a session of Konosuba TRPG, characters will take a variety of actions, such as climbing up a sheer cliffside, searching for documents in a library storehouse, hiding in the shadows to evade pursuers, and so forth. In this game, players will roll dice to determine whether their character's actions succeed or fail. This is called an action check. So whenever you are called upon to make a check or perform a check, this all refers to performing an action check. Action checks are broadly categorized into basic checks and opposition checks. Let's talk about basic checks. Most of the time, when performing an action check, you will use the rules for basic checks. First, you declare a check. The Game Master decides which ability score to use for the check. For example, the Game Master could choose Strength for lifting heavy objects or Perception for noticing things. Then, the Game Master determines a difficulty level, or DL, that corresponds to the challenge of the action. You must refer to the difficulty level table for guidelines on how to set difficulty levels. But after some time, it will be very easy for the Game Master to set up a difficulty level without looking at these tables. However, these guidelines are useful, and they use an average civilian statistics as a basis. And later on, the Game Master will need to come up with a different difficulty level for higher level characters. In addition, when a non-fumble on a roll is the only thing necessary, the Game Master doesn't have to decide a difficulty level. Next, you roll the dice. The player rolls 2 dice. Depending on the character's situation or environment, they may roll more or less dice. Depending on the roll of the dice, the action will succeed or will fail. Let's talk about criticals. If 2 of the rolled dice are 6s, the check is automatically passed. This is called a critical. Normally, a player will roll 2 dice, meaning all the rolled dice have to be 6 to become a critical. However, when rolling 3 or more dice, as long as 2 of those dice result in 6s, that is a critical. If a player rolls only 1 die, a critical cannot occur. Now when it comes to fumbles, if all the rolled dice are 1s, the check automatically fails. This is called a fumble. Unlike critical rolls, fumbles will only happen when every die comes up as a 1. Thus, the more dice that are rolled, the lower the chance of a fumble. After rolling the dice, the player adds the dice total to the relevant ability score, as decided by the Game Master. This value, referred to as the total check score, or just total score, represents how much of an effect the character had during the check. So the formula is total score equal to ability score plus the result of the dice roll. The Game Master compares the total check score of the player to the difficulty level, determined before the check was made, of course. If the total check score is equal to or greater than the difficulty level, the basic check succeeds, and if it's lower, it fails. Some skills that a character may learn apply further bonuses to the dice roll, or even add dice to the check. Dungeons can also contain traps, which can grant penalties to a dice roll, or reduce the number of dice a player rolls. First, add up how many dice will be added and subtracted. Nothing can bring the number of dice a player would roll for a check below 1. Once the number of dice to be rolled has been determined, you roll them and add the total to the relevant ability score. If there are any bonuses or penalties, apply them to the total. Once you've done so, you have the final score. Even if the final score is a negative number, you still use that result. There could be other modifiers. The Game Master may adjust the difficulty level, number of dice, or total result depending on the situation the character is currently in. Now, when it comes to opposition checks, they are made when a character directly responds to another character's basic check. For example, one character may attack with a weapon, and another might try to evade. Opposition checks split involved characters into 2 groups, They are actor and reactor. An actor is a character actively performing a check, while a reactor is a character performing their own check in response to an actor's. To take a combat example, the character performing a check to see if their attack hits would be the actor, while the one who does a check to evade would be the reactor. Opposition checks don't use a difficulty level. Rather, one player will perform a check to get a total check score, and then the reactor will perform a check in the same way. After any actors and reactors have their respective total check scores, the opposition check's result is determined. Whichever character has the highest total check score is the winner, and that character's action is then used. If an actor and reactor end up with the same total check score during an opposition check, the reactor wins. This is called the rule of reactor priority. This is used even when both characters achieve a critical hit. When it comes to fumbling, if an actor fumbles their check, any reactor's actions automatically succeed, and they don't need to make their own checks. If a reactor fumbles, then any actors win. If you need a total check score for a character who has fumbled, you use a 0. There may be times when you aren't able to decide which character is the actor and which is the reactor. In these cases, if the two total check scores are the same, redo the opposition check. When doing so, don't change any of the check's conditions or modifiers at all. In addition, treat a repeat opposition check as not spending any extra in-game time. So any sort of task resolution is carried out using these rules. They give you examples of ability scores and basic checks here. For example, when it comes to strength, it represents a character's physical strength, physical toughness, and athletic ability, of course. So this has to do with lifting heavy objects or continually lifting those objects, withstanding physical pain and such. When it comes to agility, it represents a character's quickness as well as their sense of balance. So this is about crossing a swaying suspension bridge without falling, avoiding falling objects, and such situations. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part, we are going to talk about the session progression, the sequence of things or the flow of things. As you can see, task resolution is very simple. Just roll a couple of 6-sided dice and add the relevant ability score. But if you obtain some bonuses because of your skills, of the situation, of the tools that you are using, then that adds to the check, perhaps reducing the difficulty or making things more difficult, or adding or subtracting dice to your roll. Thank you for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.